My topic is immigration. I will be focusing on how the government has consistently failed to adequately address the issues of racial bias in immigration policy. And there are 3 points that I found interesting about American immigration demographics that are what drew me to this topic in the first place. The first is that the number of undocumented immigrants in the United States has continually risen since 1965. And as you can see on the graph, it rose from 9.6 million in 1965 to 4.5 million by 2015. And it is also estimated to reach 78 million by 2065 if it continues on the same trajectory. The second point I found interesting was that in 2017, unauthorized immigrants accounted for nearly a quarter of the foreign-born population. And then the third point is that Mexico has consistently been the most common country of origin, accounting for 11.2 million of all immigrants in the United States. So this information led me to ask a few questions about the immigration policy in the US and to research a little bit more into its history. So the first question that I asked was, how do current immigration admissions policies privilege some kinds of people over others? And the second is, how are current immigration admissions policies continuing to perpetuate the increase in undocumented immigrants and racial disparities despite the intention of the 1965 amendment to the INA to eliminate such limitations? In order to answer this question, I had to dive a little bit further into the history of immigration policy. Looking at the 20th century, I found that 1924 marked the beginning of an important change in immigration policy for the United States. In 1924, the Johnson-Reed Act established the National Origins Formula. This system placed numerical limits on immigrants for the first time, particularly targeting restrictions on Asian immigrants in order to, quote unquote, preserve the ideal of US homogeneity, according to the administration of the time. Another important moment was in 1965 when the Hart-Celler Act, or the Immigration Nationality Act amendment, created a global ceiling on annual immigration, limiting the quotas to an even 20,000 per country and 290,000 globally, and eradicating the previous origins formula. The Western Hemisphere had previously been exempt from many of the immigration restrictions established in the 1920s, and large numbers of Mexicans would commute into the US under programs like the Bracero visas that despite their exploitative nature, allowed Mexicans to legally perform low-wager agricultural jobs in the US. Despite the limitations imposed by the 1965 amendment, the demand for immigration in Mexico did not subside. By limiting the number of entrants on a global scale, the US failed to account for the different population sizes and pre-existing relationships of different countries. These immigrants did not stop entering the US because of these laws. They simply sought ulterior means. It's clear that the 1965 amendment and subsequent policy choices continue to discriminate against specific nationalities and limit legal means of entry for the population that needs them most, despite their supposed attempt to equalize immigration opportunity on a global scale. The demographics I previously focused on demonstrate that the laws implemented in 1965 were not effective, and there has been a continuation in the growth of illegal immigration into the US throughout the 20th century. The issue intended to be solved in 1965 has persisted, and the number of undocumented immigrants in the country has only increased. The current administration has placed a renewed emphasis on these issues, attempting to ameliorate the situation through increasingly restrictive and discriminatory policy and rhetoric. The 21st century, therefore, is just a continuation of the same policy system. From the start of his campaign, Donald Trump has placed significant emphasis on the issue of immigration and perpetuated this racist rhetoric. In 2015, while announcing his candidacy, Trump called Mexican immigrants rapists and went on to defend his statement when pressed about it.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Now, you've tried to clarify this statement in recent days, Donald, but I guess the question comes down to this. Do you regret saying that specifically about rapists, or do you stand by it?
No, not at all. Of course, it's not only Mexico. If you let that run a little bit longer, it talks about people coming from all over. They're coming from all over. They'll soon be coming, and probably already have be coming from all over the world. You're probably going to have terrorists coming from the Middle East. Somebody said, oh, we don't have terrorists. They don't even know, because they don't know who's coming. So we have this open border. It's a sieve. It's like water pouring through. People are coming in by the hundreds of thousands. We have no idea who's coming in. And it's not just Mexicans, and I have a great relationship with Mexico and with Mexicans. I have an absolutely great relationship. But we're not just talking about Mexico. Now, Mexico is very smart. You know, Mexico makes it impossible. It's one of the hardest nations in the world to become a citizen of, okay? But people run through Mexico. They go through our border like nothing.
In the same speech, he announced his plan to build a wall on the border. Despite promising in his campaign speech that Mexico would pay for the wall and recently announcing a plan to build 500 more miles of new barriers by the end of his presidency, the project has been completely funded by the U.S. and is severely underperforming. It is estimated that each mile of the wall that is built can cost up to $30 million, and so far, only about 110 miles have been completed this far into his presidency. Furthermore, such a project would only lead immigrants attempting to cross the border undetected to venture further into perilous terrains in order to do so. In 2017, Trump attempted to restrict a number of policies: the Muslim travel ban, his attempt to rescind temporary protected status for what he supposedly called the shithole countries, Haiti, Sudan, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, and the attempt to rescind the DACA programs are all examples of such policy measures. Despite the failure of a number of policies, the results are more stringent immigration laws and the proliferation of racist rhetoric.
Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? Another deplorable statement said by the President of the United States in the Oval Office with members of Congress. Those shithole countries, by the way, he was talking about Haiti, El Salvador, countries in Africa, again, said in the Oval Office. June 19th, 2018. Democrats are the problem. They don't care about crime and want illegal immigrants, no matter how bad they may be, to pour into and infest our country like MS-13. Notice that date, June 19th, 2018. That is about 3 days and 3 years after Donald Trump announced his candidacy for the presidency, where he called Mexicans rapists. But infest our country, that now takes the rhetoric to a whole new level, where he is dehumanizing people. And when people are dehumanized, bad things can and have happened.
As history has demonstrated, this type of restrictive policymaking does not prevent the entry of immigrants to the country. It only pushes them to seek ulterior means that are often more dangerous and live under the constant threat of expulsion. After analyzing these policies, I have come up with some of my own proposed solutions. Firstly, the 1965 Hart-Celler Act and subsequent policies. It is evident that the 1965 Hart-Celler Act and the subsequent policies, including those enacted under the current administration, have largely focused on the enforcement of more stringent border laws and penalties while disregarding the different pre-existing relationships with other countries. It is necessary for American immigration policy to consider the factors that are driving immigrants out of their own countries and into the United States. Understanding these factors would allow policymakers to address the sources of issues and lessen the necessity for immigration in developing countries. I think that governments would be more effective in countering the reproduction of undocumented immigrants by allocating their resources to strengthening the economies of origin countries through trade investment policies, raising the numerical ceiling on legal migration, and reestablishing a statute of limitations on deportations, as well as facilitating collective bargaining for workers in agriculture and low-wage industries. Furthermore, the racist rhetoric that has received renewed vivacity under the current administration and in the president's own speech is detrimental to the inclusivity necessary for the approval of such policies to the American public, from the American public, and therefore their government. The normalization of racist rhetoric and limitation of opportunity being produced under the current administration will only add to the current issue by failing to prevent the need for migration and obstruct their legal means of entry, causing many migrants to enter the country through illegal means.